Here we are, a few weeks into it, and we still got about a few more weeks covering the world of audiobook publishing and talking about some of the various avenues. A couple of them we've already covered included Audiobook Creation Exchange, otherwise known as ACX, and we also talked about Findaway Voices by Spotify, and then this past week we covered Authors Republic, easy for me to say. This week, we're going to be discussing one that isn't chatted about too often. It's called Audiobooks Unleashed. This is probably like the second or third time I've talked about Audiobooks Unleashed, and it definitely looks like they continue to improve and iterate what they have available to self-publishers out there. The real question is this ACX alternative worth it in 2024? We're going to be talking about that in today's podcast, so make sure you stay tuned. About once to twice per week, I send out an email broadcast to over 3,000 authors, keeping them in the know about all things related to writing and self-publishing. I've got contacts at every major self-publishing company, including KDP, Ingram Spark, Drafted Digital, Lulu, StreetLib, Publish Drive, Later Press, and more. Once I get inside intel, I'm happy to share with my email newsletter subscribers first. To subscribe to my email newsletter today, visit dalelinks.com/signup. Again, that's dalelinks.com/signup. All right, let's jump into it because there's a lot of ground to cover about Audiobooks Unleashed. Now, Audiobooks Unleashed is a platform dedicated to providing a wide range of audiobooks for various genres and interests. It offers audiobooks spanning from like fiction to nonfiction, bestsellers, and niche categories. Users can listen to free audiobooks on this platform with the expectation they leave a review on Audible, Audiobooks Unleashed, or elsewhere. Now, you're probably saying, wait, hang on, are we talking about distribution? Yes, we are talking about audiobook distribution because Audiobooks Unleashed initially started out as an audiobook promotion service. And then about a handful of years ago, they started offering distribution. So they do this for self-published authors, indie authors, if you will. They also offer experienced narrators for you to work with on their platform. And also they have production services. Now, there are 3 ways to publish through Audiobooks Unleashed, but it comes with a little bit of an asterisk because they don't just accept any old Tom, Dick, or Harry. There's a full vetting process. In fact, you must submit your audiobook production for approval if you want to distribute through them. Now, things you need to know before you apply. They say that you need to have at least 50 ratings on Amazon for your title. They need to have quality cover art, so I imagine that's very, very subjective. You are a well-known author and or narrator, or if you've got reviews, accolades, or awards, such as, New York Times bestseller, all that type of thing. Now, should your audiobook not have those items, they want more info about your marketing plans, past sales figures. They also want to know about the author or the narrator's past work and also the social media presence. They want to make sure it's worthwhile for them to break ground because to my understanding, it's a small team. And so they're obviously having to fork up a little bit of money in order to do this little joint venture with you. So they want to make sure it's worthwhile. So the 3 types of production you can get into is, of course, going to be do it yourself. If you come with your own audiobooks, you can go over and get it vetted by them to make sure it's a fit for that platform. So where you would do it is either do it yourself or maybe you hire a narrator elsewhere in another marketplace, be it on Authors Republic or ACX or any other direct to narration service, So big shout out to Fleischman Media. That's a great example. Anthony Fleischman is a great narrator and I could just go directly to him rather than have a middleman in between us. I prefer working directly with the narrator. Now, when you're hiring a narrator, it's based on per finished hour. Now, I know I've said this numerous times over the past few weeks, but I'm going to repeat it anyways. Per finished hour is based on the work that is completed. So whatever they hand in. So if your audiobook is 3 hours of content and they're charging $200 per finished hour, it would be about $600 for a 3-hour book. Now, you're probably saying, my gosh, that's a lot of money being paid per hour. No, that's per finished hour. And in fact, on a lot of instances, it takes about 3 to as much as 8 hours of production time for 1 hour. So when you look at that and you're going, wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah, it is a lot of money, but there is a lot of work that's being put into it, even for some of the most experienced narrators out there. So there's the per finished hour rate. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, and I really kind of like what they have cooking over here. They have what's called a royalty split. Now, I've not been a fan of royalty split in the past, Places like, for instance, ACX, I just don't really like their agreement. I've talked about that. Go back to that previous podcast. You want to know why I don't like royalty splits. But in this particular instance, they offer a royalty split for 50-50. So 50% of the revenue goes over towards the narrator and 50% comes to you. And that's the net profits, that is. So you might have your ebook, or excuse me, your audiobook priced at, say, $20. It's going to get hacked down, first of all, because the distributor is going to take their cut and also the retailer is going to take their cut. And then when that comes back, that's what you're going to be able to split with that narrator. So the next option is royalty hybrid. Now, this is a decrease per finished hour upfront payment. So say, for instance, you have a narrator that is extraordinarily high. We'll say they're $500 to $750 per finished hour. Maybe what they will do is a hybrid agreement to where you pay a fraction of that cost up front for the per finished hour. So it could probably be $100 as opposed to that $500 or $750 or something like that. And it's still going to be a 50-50 royalty split. You don't own the rights to that. It's still going to be that split there, but that's getting the opportunity to work with a narrator you wouldn't otherwise be able to work with that's at a higher budget. Now, if you're kind of balking at that and going, well, why don't I just go ahead and hire them fully or just do a regular 50-50? The thing is, there are some narrators that actually lean on outside resources for editing and mastering their work. They just essentially show up as talent. So that's what's going to help them offset the cost. So that's why they end up going into something like that. So that's the royalty hybrid. Now, here's an interesting one. It's royalty deferred. Now, in their words, the rights holder does not pay the producer anything up front. Instead, they decide on a deferred amount to be paid to the producer in royalties. The producer is paid all of the royalties until the agreed amount is hit. The royalties then either go back to the rights holder or to a royalty split, whichever the team decides. So that is really kind of nice. And one of the things I've discovered with Audiobooks Unleashed today is they are super customizable. Like, they want to work with you and they want to work with whatever you need to work with. So there are also custom agreement options. So say, for instance, the 50-50 royalty split doesn't sit well with you. You're like, I don't want to give them 50% of my stuff. You could probably work out something with that narrator to make that happen. Now, what about the specs? The audiobook specs are pretty cut and dry. Pretty much the same specs you're going to expect from a place like Audiobook Creation Exchange. I always point to ACX because they have a very high standard. And if you can meet that high standard, you're going to make it on any platform. On any platform, to be honest with you. So if you're working with a narrator, chances are very likely they already know those audiobook specs and get they'll get those dialed in just right for you. Now, if you're not familiar with it, what I would recommend is either Google that up or go over to Audiobooks Unleashed. I think it's distribution.audiobooksunleashed.com, and they have an FAQ section that will be able to assist you through some of those specs. Now, distribution, though, this is where it gets pretty interesting. They have direct distribution to Amazon and Audible. Yeah, there's no middleman of ACX. I guess this used to be the case, but now they go direct to Amazon and Audible. In their words, they actually say, we now have a direct relationship with Audible and do not use ACX at any point in our process. You can also set the retail price on Audible and may be eligible for pre-order campaigns. What? What? You can change the price on Audible? Are you kidding me? Like, that part right there sold me, like, instantly, because that's been my biggest qualm when it comes to Audible. Yeah, they're bringing in the lion's share of publication profits for audiobooks, but I'm really reluctant to utilize Audible these days because I can't control the pricing. They're all about, hey, how long is your book? Well, this is how much we're going to charge. Screw that. No. And they also have pre-order campaigns open to it. What? Get out. That is awesome. So big kudos to Audiobooks Unleashed for putting such a good deal together. Now, you can opt to solely distribute to Amazon and Audible for a higher royalty. This is what they've said. Now, presumably, that's probably a 40% royalty through them. And remember, there's going to be a split, and I'm going to get to how much that royalty is going to be for you here in just a second. Now, There is also non-exclusive distribution, which will get you another 50 retailers and libraries. They say from online stores to physical CDs to library rentals. Okay, you got me at physical CDs. I'm like, people actually still listen to those. Apparently they do, but that's really cool. But what they specifically said when it comes to distribution, because see, I tried. I searched high and low and everywhere. Looked on Reddit, looked on all these different forums. No one had a clear answer about what their distribution was. There are 50 plus other retailers and libraries, and what's the royalty breakdown for each one of those, because it's going to vary based on that agreement that they've set with those ones. They actually say point blank, contact us for a list of the 50 plus retailers and libraries we distribute to. I reached out to them today, but I'm not going to hold it against them that they didn't get back to me. But I would recommend, if you want that list, reach out to them at info@audiobooks.unleashed.com. Again, that's info@audiobooks.unleashed.com. And you could be able to ask for the full breakdown for their non-exclusive distribution. So they do have that option available to you. Now, let's just say, for instance, you're like me, I'm super ambitious. I like to hit as many platforms as I possibly can and get the best royalty I have available to me. So can you go through something like ACX, Findaway Voices, Authors Republic, and Audiobooks Unleashed? About a couple of years ago, I actually got to speak to one of their support reps, and they're kind of like, yeah, we prefer that you just utilize our avenue. They can deselect some of those, but what ends up happening is you end up deselecting enough of those options, it doesn't make it worth Audiobooks Unleashed's while. It's not worth their while, because obviously they're having to put together all this stuff for distribution and manage all this. And at the end of the day, you end up getting some obscure avenue that maybe gets one sale per year. It's not worth their while. And I totally understand. Now, how much can you deselect from their distribution remains to be seen. You'll have to ask support about that. But it's to my understanding that they are really focused on the author that wants to come to their platform and just leverage them only. Now, here's where it gets a little bit kind of questionable. It's an 80% royalty. So there's an actual 80-20% split. So you get 80% of net royalties. So meaning that since they're an aggregate publisher, they're distributing books on your behalf, they're taking 20% of the net revenue that's coming in. So as an example, let's say that we're going over to Audible, and let's just say that it's a 40% agreement. Then you're going to take 80% of that 40% that's coming back to you. 20% of that 40% is going to go over to Audiobooks Unleashed. Now, when you break it down to each one of the avenues, again, it's knowing what they have available and what agreement they have had put in place for royalties for each one of those avenues, which remains to be seen. Now, some of them don't, I imagine for some library or pool subscription-based services, it's not going to be based on a percentage. It could probably be based on a checkout or something like that. But I'm hoping that I will get a little bit of clarity from the Audiobooks Unleashed team very soon. And if they're watching this, thank you so much for tuning in. Now, here's some interesting notes about Audiobooks Unleashed. They're great for promoting audiobooks with the promo code distribution. That's what they started out with. If you want to market and promote your audiobooks, then this is definitely going to be the platform. They also offer foreign language narrators starting at about $150 per finished hour. They also offer manuscript prep. Yeah, you actually got to get your manuscript prepared ahead. You don't want to just give your book over to your audiobook narrator and say, have fun. You need to make sure that you're breaking it down, and it also makes sense when someone reads it out loud. So manuscript prep, kind of nice. I would love to know how much that costs, because if it doesn't cost a dime, I'm going to start using them. Translation services in Spanish, French, Italian, German, Portuguese, and Dutch. Translations start at $50 per finished hour. They also offer production and casting. They also offer sample checks and also in-house engineering. Oh, well, man, we've burnt through a lot of the information. I really wish I could have given you a little bit more, but unfortunately, I was not prepared as much as I would have loved to have been for today's podcast, but I've given you enough to make it dangerous. Stay up to date in the world of self-publishing when you subscribe to my email newsletter at dalehanks.com/signup. Again, that's dalehanks.com/signup. Keep in mind that I am the person that's 100% in charge of those emails, so you're not going to have your email sold to any third-party companies, and I'm not going to be beating you up to buy all of my books, although it'd be cool if you did buy my books. Here are my final thoughts when it comes to Audiobooks Unleashed. I'm hopeful about them. I would love to see more transparency around distribution and royalty agreements per retailer, but I'm waiting for that answer and would recommend you do the same thing. Reach out to them, find out what it is. Now, I'd love to take them for a spin for audiobook promos and have heard positive feedback about them. I may have used them once, or maybe I did it for a video or something, but I recall it was actually a very good experience and it was relatively inexpensive. Hey, as we start to wrap up today's podcast, I want to let you know that we're still got about another couple weeks ahead of us here in the audiobook publishing sphere. In fact, next week we're going to be talking about Lantern Publishing. Yeah, Lantern Audio Publishing. They used to be known as Listen Up Audio, and they changed their branding name, about a year or two ago, something like that. So we're going to explore that avenue, and then the week after next, we're going to wrap it up with kind of a miscellaneous of platforms that offer audiobook distribution in addition to other things like ebook publishing and print publishing. So it's going to be kind of a catch-all episode, probably a little bit longer than today's episode. Till next week, this has been Self-Publishing with Dale, and I hope to chat with you then.